I believe that everyone is here for a panel entitled Role of Therapist, Role of Client.
Now, I had a negative reaction to this word role. I don't think the therapist or the client have a role. And I think it puts a cast on the therapeutic session that to me would make sense on a stage, but does not make sense when we are doing therapy. But I realized that what was meant was how do we react to the situation? How does the therapist relate to the situation, and how does the client relate to it?
Like Rollo, I found myself really turned off by the title of this panel, because it seems to me that it is not a role, it is a function. I don't play, and I don't want to play a role with my client. To me, it's one of the functions that I perform during the day, whether I'm getting my meal, going shopping, making love, reading a book, whatever. They are different functions, but they are all me carrying out different functions. And when I'm a therapist, I am me, but I am carrying out the function of a therapist. To me, that's a very receptive sort of function. I want to be ready to receive the client with whatever he or she brings to this relationship. I would like to be very acceptant of any feelings, whether they're similar to my own or not, to any values, whether they're similar to my own or not, to any description of actions, even though I might disapprove of the actions in terms of my value system. I want to make this a safe relationship in which the client can begin to explore and become himself or herself. I would like to make it safe by being so sensitively understanding of the client's inner world that there is no barrier to further exploration on his or her part.
I just like to give a picture. And I like to think of that word that was put in this program, role, to think of it as terms of expectations. About what expectations I might have of myself, what expectations I might have with whomever it is that I'm going to make some kind of a contract with. Now, the context in which I work so much of the time now is not with just another person, but with several other persons. So the first thing that I think about is that as I am interacting with someone, there are a whole lot of other someones that are taking their cues from what will happen to them. Whether or not the context can be safe is going to be in terms of what people see me in relation to someone else doing. That's one of the things I'm very clear about. That's both a model and a source of either confidence, trust, or concern. So that of myself, then, as a therapist, I expect myself to be seen as some kind of a model from which people are going to take their clues about what will happen, the same way we did as children, where we took our clues from the things that were present in relation to our parents that they didn't always necessarily say. Also, as a therapist, I expect to create a situation in which there is an equality of the meaning of our value to each other, but we have to delineate the function. I'm going to be the leader of the change process, but I am not going to be the leader of the people in that process.
It seems to me the first thing I do is that I think of this as and I feel apologetic because no one so far has talked this way. I sell something and I collect money. And no one comes to me who doesn't pay money. Now, that seems to be somehow not a nice thing to say, because very few people talk about money. But everybody who comes to me has to pay money. Now, for this, I do certain things which I would best characterize as promises. I make certain promises to deliver certain things, to do certain things, and not to do certain things. And both of these are very important. And this I wouldn't dream going into, because this would take a long time. But in other words, as I see my own role, I promise to do certain things, and what I promise I do, and I promise not to do certain things, and what I promise not to do, I don't do. And by and large, what I expect of the client is very much in line what Rollo May said. That really depends pretty much on what the client wants. My model sort of is playing tennis. If you're a good tennis player, if you're a tennis pro, well, you're going to hit the ball depending on how the other person hits the ball to you. That's your job. Now, more generally, though, what are the roles of therapist and client in our enterprise? Well, I think it would be only fair to point out that the role of the therapist, to concentrate on the role of the therapist, because there are a number of identifiable things in terms of the history of psychotherapy that therapists have expected of clients, and therefore, to that extent, they have put them in that role. And clients, historically, have obviously fulfilled this. Well, going beyond the first one, and that is of paying money, which I would think has to be mentioned, the second role would be, is to validate the role of the therapist as a good person. That is, what therapists want is adulation, positive transference, love. Thirdly, what they want is followers. Our field is full of various sects: Freudians, Jungians, Rankians, Reichians, Frommians, transactionalist, rational emotive, reality. The English language is not big enough to fill it.